The morphine drip had been gone for 2 days, replaced by a prescription bottle of ibuprofen that wasn't doing nearly enough. Every time I shifted my weight in bed, the nerve pain shot from my lower back down through my left leg like someone had pressed a hot wire against my spine. 3 weeks ago, I had been a functioning 34-year-old woman with a career, a savings account, and a plan. Now I was lying in my childhood bedroom, counting ceiling tiles, trying to remember what it felt like to stand up without gripping something first. The surgery had gone well, my neurosurgeon had said. A herniated disc at L4-L5, pressing directly on the nerve root. Left untreated, I risked permanent numbness in my left foot, possible loss of bladder control. The surgery was not optional. The 6 weeks of recovery afterward, no lifting anything heavier than a coffee mug, no driving, limited walking, physical therapy, 3 times a week. That part was also not optional. My apartment lease had ended 2 weeks before my surgery date, and the timing had seemed almost convenient at the time. My parents had the space. I had been paying them $600 a month since I moved back in 8 months ago to save money for a down payment. It had felt like a practical solution. I heard my brother's voice before I heard his footsteps. He was on the phone, the way he always was, speaking too loudly about things that never materialized. At 27, he had tried his hand at dropshipping, then cryptocurrency consulting, then a candle business that filled the garage with wax and boxes for 4 months before quietly disappearing. Currently, he was a content creator, which meant he posted videos about personal finance on a platform where he had managed to accumulate just under 300 followers in 11 months. My parents referred to his content creation as his career. They had converted the spare bedroom into a recording space for him already. With a ring light my father had driven 40 minutes to pick up, and a blue and white backdrop my mother had sewn herself. I did not begrudge him the spare bedroom. I had the room I grew up in, and that was enough. Until it wasn't. My brother pushed open my door without knocking, which he had been doing since we were children, and which I had never successfully convinced him to stop. He was looking at his phone, barely glancing at me as he swept his gaze across the room. "Yeah, this has better natural light than the other room," he said into the phone. "The window faces east. Morning content is going to look completely different in here." I pulled myself up onto one elbow, which took more effort than I wanted to admit. "What are you talking about?" He held up one finger at me the way someone does when they're on an important call. I waited. He finished his sentence about lighting ratios, said goodbye to whoever was on the other end, and finally looked at me with the expression he always wore when he was about to ask for something he already assumed he would get. "So the thing is," he said, "I got a brand partnership, a real one this time. Supplement company. They want consistent content for the next 3 months, and my current setup just isn't giving me what I need aesthetically. This room has the east-facing window, the higher ceilings, more square footage. It would actually work." I stared at him. "This is my room." "I know, but you're not really using it. I mean, you're just recovering. You'll be back on your feet in what, a month? 6 weeks minimum. And I live here." He tilted his head as if I had said something mildly inconvenient. "It's not like you have furniture or anything. All your stuff is in storage. It would be an easy transition." I did not answer because I did not yet understand that the conversation I was having with my brother was not actually the conversation I needed to be worried about. I found that out 20 minutes later when my father appeared in the doorway. He was wearing the look I had cataloged over a lifetime, chin slightly forward, arms crossed, the practiced distance of a man who had decided something and was now delivering it as a verdict rather than a discussion. My father was not a cruel man in the way that people who enjoy cruelty are cruel. He was cruel in the way that comfortable people sometimes are through indifference dressed up as practicality. "Your brother has a real opportunity here," he said. "I understand that, but I live in this room. You're temporarily staying here. There's a difference." Something shifted in my stomach that had nothing to do with my nerve pain. "I've been paying rent for 8 months, Dad. $600 a month. I have a lease agreement with you." He waved his hand. "That was an informal arrangement. I have the receipts. And the signed paper you gave me." My mother appeared behind him, which was the confirmation I needed that this conversation had already been had between them before it reached me. She was carrying a tote bag for some reason, as if she had already begun the process of organizing. "Sweetheart," she said, in the voice she used when she wanted to sound reasonable. "Your brother has been working very hard. This partnership could actually pay him real money. You know how important it is for him to get established. I had spinal surgery 11 days ago. I know you did. And you're healing beautifully. The doctor said the surgery went perfectly. The surgery went well. The recovery takes 6 weeks. I cannot drive. I cannot lift anything. I cannot stand for extended periods. I have physical therapy 3 times a week that someone has to take me to because I cannot get behind a wheel. My father checked his watch. He actually checked his watch. We're not putting you out on the street. You can use the couch in the sunroom. It folds out. The sunroom was a converted porch addition with no insulation, which my parents used for storage and which got down to 50-something degrees at night even in October. It also had no door that closed fully, no attached bathroom, and a fold-out mattress that I had slept on once at age 14 during a family gathering, and which had left a bar-shaped bruise across my hip that lasted 2 weeks. I cannot sleep on a fold-out couch, I said slowly. I have to keep my spine aligned. My discharge instructions specifically say I need a firm, supportive mattress. Getting up from floor level, or from a collapsed mattress, is going to tear open everything they just fixed. You're being dramatic, my mother said. Not unkindly. That was the worst part about the way she said it. She genuinely believed it. I looked at her for a long moment. I thought about the 8 months of rent checks. I thought about the Sundays I had driven her to her book club because her car was in the shop, and the 2 weeks I had managed her medication schedule after her knee replacement the previous year, bringing her ice packs and heating pads and the specific brand of herbal tea she liked. I thought about being 17 and working at a coffee shop to buy my own school supplies because the money was needed for my brother's travel baseball league. When? I asked. Derek's equipment gets delivered Thursday, my father said. So Wednesday evening would be ideal. Wednesday was 4 days away. I called my best friend first. She was in the middle of a lease she shared with 2 roommates, no floor space, deeply apologetic. I called a woman I had been close to in college who now lived 40 minutes away, and she offered her couch with so much visible reluctance that I thanked her and told her not to worry about it. I called 2 other people and got 2 more versions of the same gentle, helpless, sorry. Each one felt like something pulling loose. I was on my 4th call, trying to keep my voice steady, when my phone buzzed with a text from my supervisor at the hospital. Her name was Diane, and she had been my department head for 6 of the years I had worked in the cardiology unit. She was in her mid-50s, practical in the way that people who have spent decades in medicine become practical, with a dry sense of humor and an absolute intolerance for inefficiency or nonsense. She had texted to check on my recovery progress, because she was that kind of supervisor, the kind who actually tracked the people on her team. I sat there for a moment looking at her text, and then I did something I would not have expected myself to do. I called her instead of texting back, and when she picked up and asked how I was doing, I told her. All of it. Not the measured, composed version I had been rehearsing for other people. The real version, with the shaking in my voice and the part about my father checking his watch. There was a pause on the line. Where are you right now? She asked. Still in my room. For 4 more days. Okay, she said. Don't agree to anything, don't sign anything, and don't move out voluntarily. I'm going to make some calls. Diane, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. I'm going to anyway. Give me until tomorrow morning. She called me back in 6 hours, not the morning. Her husband's sister had a rental unit attached to her house, a true guest suite with a real bed, a private bathroom, and an entrance separate from the main house. She had been meaning to rent it out for the past year, but hadn't gotten around to it. Diane had explained my situation. The woman wanted to meet me first, but she was open to the conversation. Her name was Carol, and she was 63 years old, recently retired from a career in human resources, with a manner so matter-of-fact and warm simultaneously that I felt something unknot in my chest. The moment I sat down across from her kitchen table, Diane had driven me to the meeting because I couldn't drive myself, and she sat beside me while I explained my situation and my physical limitations and my ability to pay rent once I returned to work. Carol looked at me for a moment. Then she said, My daughter had a back surgery 4 years ago. I know what a real recovery looks like. She pushed a key across the table. Move in when you're ready. We'll do the paperwork tomorrow. Getting out of my parents' house was not clean or simple. My brother was already in the hallway with boxes. The afternoon I started collecting my things, measuring something on his phone while I made slow trips with a bag I wasn't supposed to be carrying. My mother offered to help pack, which meant she would have packed my belongings the way she had always packed things for me quickly, without asking, deciding what mattered. I thanked her and kept doing it myself. My father stood in the driveway as Diane's car idled. He looked, briefly, like he wanted to say something that wasn't a verdict. I waited. He looked at the car. He looked at me standing slightly sideways because straight-on posture still required more core engagement than I had access to. "You'll let us know when you're settled," he said. "I'll let you know," I said. Which was not the same thing. Carol's guest suite was everything the sunroom was not: warm, private, a mattress that didn't collapse in the middle, a bathroom 6 steps from the bed. She checked on me once a day, always at a reasonable hour, always brief. Leaving groceries, she said she was picking up anyway, which was probably sometimes true, and sometimes was not. Within a week, I could tell the difference between her footsteps and the sound of the wind in the covered walkway outside my door. Diane came by twice that first week, not to hover but to drop off food and update me on the department. She had also, quietly, mentioned my situation to a colleague whose wife happened to practice tenant and housing law. Her name was Patricia, and she called me on a Tuesday. I had been meticulous with documentation over my 8 months at my parents' house. This was not something I had done out of suspicion. I was meticulous by profession. Nurses who are not meticulous with documentation do not last long in cardiology units. I had every rent receipt. I had the paper my father had signed when I moved in, which used the word lease in 2 separate sentences. I had bank statements showing 8 months of consecutive $600 transfers. I had my discharge paperwork, dated, with the post-operative instructions typed clearly in 12-point font, including the part about requiring a supportive sleep surface and limiting physical activity. I also had, because I had been raised by people who taught me to handle my own paperwork, every document related to my surgery and recovery, every pre-authorization from insurance, every medical bill, the 3 emails I had sent my parents during my hospital stay explaining what the recovery requirements would be, which they had both responded to with brief acknowledgments. Patricia was quiet for a long time when I finished sending her the files. "Okay," she said. "So what they've done here has a few different layers. The informal lease agreement is still a lease agreement under state law. Giving you 4 days' notice does not meet the minimum required by any standard. Doing it while you were recovering from documented major surgery, with written evidence that they knew about your physical limitations, that's where it gets more interesting." She paused. "Did they return your last month's rent deposit?" I had given them $600 when I moved in. I had never seen it mentioned again. "No, of course they didn't." I could hear her writing something. "There's also the matter of how you left. You didn't vacate because you wanted to. You vacated because you had no medically viable alternative in the space they were offering you. That distinction matters." The case Patricia built took several months. Wrongful, constructive eviction. Failure to return security deposit. Breach of written rental agreement. Emotional distress, with medical documentation of the impact that the forced relocation had on my recovery timeline. I had, in fact, set back my physical therapy progress by nearly 2 weeks because the stress had tightened every muscle group my body was trying to heal. My physical therapist had noted it in my file without knowing why. While Patricia worked, I focused on what I could control. Diane had approved a modified return-to-work schedule, 3 days a week at first. Desk-only duties, nothing requiring me to stand for extended periods. I came back 4 weeks ahead of the original estimate, which my PT said was possible because, she noted, patients with stable living situations and consistent sleep quality tend to heal faster. I did not say anything out loud about that. I just noted it. Carol became, over those months, something I hadn't had a name for, and eventually stopped needing to name. She did not try to mother me, and she did not maintain professional distance. She shared her opinions about television, asked my opinion about her garden, and once told me that her daughter had stopped speaking to her for 2 years over a misunderstanding that still made her sad when she thought about it. She said it plainly, without making it about me, and I appreciated that more than anything effortful she could have done. I found my own apartment in month 4. First floor, which my PT had recommended, with a parking space assigned directly outside my unit. I told Carol before I started looking, because I thought she deserved the honesty rather than the surprise. She said she had expected it, that she had known I wasn't the kind of person who stayed anywhere she didn't intend to stay, and that the room would be there if I ever needed it, which she meant as a kindness rather than a prediction. The legal process moved quietly in the background of my new ordinary life. Patricia had told me it was likely to settle before trial, and she was right. My parents had, in the interim, discovered that the rental agreement I had signed with them, the one my father insisted was informal, was going to be presented to a judge alongside 8 months of bank records and a piece of paper with the word lease on it. Twice, my father retained his own attorney, which cost money they had allocated elsewhere. My brother's brand partnership had not materialized the way he had described it. The supplement company had offered him a flat $300 for a single sponsored post, which he had accepted, and which had appeared on his channel to an audience that had declined rather than grown. The settlement came on a Thursday afternoon. I was at my desk in the cardiology unit, doing chart reviews when Patricia's email arrived. She did not bury the information. The number in the subject line was the settlement figure. It covered my legal fees, the unreturned deposit with penalties, the full damages calculation for wrongful eviction, and the documented medical costs associated with the disruption to my recovery. I read it twice. Then, I put my phone face down on my desk and finished my chart review, because that was the kind of person I had become, the kind who finishes what she started. My mother called 2 weeks after the settlement was finalized. I had not spoken to either of my parents since the day I left their driveway. I saw her name on my screen for 3 full rings before I decided to answer. Not because I owed her anything, but because I was curious what she would say. She said she hoped I was feeling better. She said it had been a very difficult few months for the whole family. She said my brother was going through some challenges, which she described in a way that suggested I would feel sympathy. She said my father's back had been bothering him, and he had been looking into treatment options. And she said this without any apparent awareness of what she was saying, or to whom she was saying it. I waited until she finished. "I'm doing well," I said. "I'm back at work full-time. My recovery is complete." "That's so good to hear," she said, and she meant it, which was somehow worse and better at the same time. "I can't do this right now," I said. Not with anger. I had spent a lot of time over the previous months letting the anger do what it needed to do, and then releasing it. Because I had learned, as a nurse and as a patient, that held tension lives in the body, and the body keeps the bill. I need some time before we have any real conversations. "When I'm ready, I'll reach out." "We're your family," she said. "I know," I said. "That's not in question." I hung up and sat for a moment in my apartment, in the chair I had bought for myself, next to the window that got good afternoon light. My spine was fully healed. My left foot had complete sensation. I could stand as long as I needed to, walk as far as I wanted, lift things that were heavier than coffee mugs. My savings account had been restored by the settlement to something that felt, for the first time in my adult life, like actual security. I thought about a lot of things in that moment. I thought about the signed lease agreement, about my father's watch, about the fold-out mattress in the uninsulated sunroom. I thought about a 27-year-old man measuring my walls while I was trying to stand up straight. I thought about my mother packing someone else's belongings without asking permission. The way she had always made decisions about my things as if the ownership were negotiable. I thought about Diane calling me back in 6 hours instead of the morning. About Carol pushing a key across a kitchen table. About Patricia saying this is where it gets more interesting with the tone of someone who had been waiting her whole career for a clean case. About my physical therapist writing stable living situation in my notes without knowing what it meant. What I had learned over the previous months was something I had known intellectually as a nurse but had not yet understood in my body. Healing is not something that happens to you. It is something you have to create the conditions for. Quiet, consistency, adequate rest, absence of ongoing harm. You cannot heal in the same environment that injured you. This is true of the spine. It is true of most things. My brother was still living at home. The east-facing room, I had been told through a mutual contact, had never quite worked the way he imagined. The light was good in the morning, but harsh by midday, and the internet connection in that part of the house had always been slightly weaker than in his original room, a fact he had discovered only after the move. His follower count had remained essentially flat. He was, apparently, considering pivoting to a different kind of content. My parents had paid their attorney fees out of my father's retirement account, which was not where they had expected that money to go. My mother was working reduced hours now because of her knee, and the household budget which had always been maintained on the assumption of my rent contribution and the theoretical future earnings of my brother's content career, was not working the way they had drawn it on paper. I did not celebrate any of this. Celebration requires investment in the outcome, and I had put my investments elsewhere into my apartment, my savings, the professional development courses I had been meaning to take for 3 years, the friendships I had let thin out and was carefully rebuilding. I was not indifferent to what had happened to them. I was clear-eyed about it, which is different. Diane pulled me aside one afternoon after a department meeting, in the way she had of making private conversations look like they were about scheduling. "How are you doing?" she asked. She meant the real question, not the social one. "I'm good," I said, and I meant the real answer. "I'm actually good." She nodded. She was not effusive about it, which was one of the things I appreciated about her. She handed me a professional development brochure for a cardiac care certification program that the hospital was subsidizing. My name was written in the margin in her handwriting, with a question mark. "Think about it," she said. I folded it and put it in my jacket pocket. "I already am." Spring came and I bought a plant for my apartment window. Then I bought a second one. They were nothing significant, a trailing pothos, a small succulent that asked almost nothing of me, but I watered them every Sunday morning with specific intention, the way I had learned to do most things since the surgery. Not quickly, not automatically, but with enough attention to notice if something needed adjusting. I had a scar along my lower back, thin and fading now, less than 3 inches long. People who saw it sometimes asked what it was from, and I told them I had had a disc surgery a while back and that it had healed well. The full story was longer, and I told it when it was useful and kept it when it wasn't, not out of shame, but because not every story needs to be told to every person. Some of them just need to be known. What I knew was this: they had miscalculated the thing about people who are already accustomed to doing hard things without help. My entire professional life had been built on managing crisis, staying steady in high-pressure situations, making good decisions under conditions that would make other people fall apart. I had spent years at the bedside of people in the worst moments of their lives, staying present and functional and precise when those people could not do it for themselves. When my family had pointed all of that at me, instead of away from me, they had not broken something fragile. They had activated something that was built for exactly this. I did not wish them harm. I had gotten to a place where I could say that, and mean it, but I had also gotten to a place where I understood that compassion and proximity are not the same requirement, that forgiveness is something you do inside yourself and has no obligation to look like reconciliation on the outside, and that some of the most important things you can do for your own healing is simply stop explaining yourself to people who have decided not to hear you. My apartment was quiet in the evenings in the way that chosen quiet is different from lonely quiet. I was learning the difference, which was something I had not known I needed to learn. I cooked dinner with ingredients I had chosen myself and ate it without justifying my choices to anyone. I slept on a mattress that did not hurt me. I went to work and did my job well and came home to a space where nothing waited to make me smaller. My brother had finally gotten a real job, according to the mutual contact who occasionally updated me on things I had not asked about. Something in retail. I hoped it was going okay for him. I meant that with more plainness than irony, which surprised me when I examined it. My father's back, reportedly, had gotten worse before the doctors found the right treatment. I thought about that sometimes, the particular cruelty and grace of bodies that keep score without asking permission. I had not called to ask about his treatment. I was not ready for that conversation, and I was no longer in the habit of having conversations I wasn't ready for simply to make other people comfortable. Diane sent me the completed certification brochure with a note that said the enrollment deadline was in 2 weeks. I enrolled the same afternoon. Some storms build for years before they arrive, and some people spend those same years mistaking the stillness for weakness. They watch you absorb and adapt and keep functioning, and they read it as surrender rather than endurance. They don't understand that endurance is not the same as acceptance, that someone who has learned to survive difficult things quietly has also, in the same process, learned exactly what they are capable of. They find out eventually, not all of them, and not always in ways they recognize, but the accounting gets done, one way or another, with or without their understanding. The body heals or it doesn't, and the life you build in the aftermath is either diminished by what happened or clarified by it. Mine had been clarified. The pothos on my window ledge was growing faster than I expected, It had sent out 3 new leaves since I brought it home, reaching toward the morning light in the uncomplicated way that living things reach toward what they need. I trimmed the longest vine and put the cutting in water on the kitchen counter, watching the roots form over the following weeks, white and thin and certain. I had learned, in the months since the surgery, and everything that came after, that most things that survive intact come out structurally different than they went in, stronger in some places, reconfigured in others, with a map inside them of everything they'd had to navigate to get through. The scar on my back was part of that map. So was Patricia's voice on the phone saying this is where it gets more interesting. So was Carol's key sliding across a kitchen table. So was the Wednesday evening I stood in my parents' driveway with a bag I wasn't supposed to carry, watching my brother haul boxes into the room I had grown up in, and deciding, without drama, that I was not going to argue anymore about what was already in motion. I just drove away. Or rather, Diane drove me away, because I couldn't drive myself yet. But I was the one who had made the call. And I was the one who made all the calls that came after. That, in the end, is the whole story.